The endless, dusty expanse of Mars had never felt more isolating to David Lyons, the lead astronomer at the remote Cydonia research outpost. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon of the red planet, casting long shadows over the rocky landscape, David was joined by his colleague, Dr. Eric Sato, a physicist known for his unquenchable curiosity and a knack for making even the most monotonous tasks entertaining. Ever think you'd spend your days chasing shadows on Mars? Eric joked as he adjusted the settings on the high-resolution imaging scanner, peering into the dusk. David chuckled, his eyes never leaving the monitors displaying feeds from the various sensors dotted around the outpost. Better than chasing paperwork back on Earth, he replied. The two men worked in comfortable silence for a moment before a series of irregular pings from the console caught their attention. Hey, what's that anomaly? That's no dust devil, Eric said, squinting at the screen. David leaned in, his fingers flying over the control panel to enhance the image. A luminous, wavering form appeared on the screen, unlike anything they had recorded before. It's some sort of energy? No clear mass, he murmured, fascinated. Let's get a closer look. Deploying the drone, Eric said, taking the initiative as he often did in these moments of discovery. He piloted the drone expertly, sending it whizzing over the Martian plains towards the coordinates of the anomaly. As the drone fed live images back to them, the anomaly resolved into a more distinct shape, a humanoid form, shimmering with iridescent light. That's not natural. It's almost like it's alive, David said, a mix of awe and caution in his voice. Could it be some form of exotic life? Uncharted territory here, David, Eric remarked, equally intrigued and cautious. We should try to contain it for study. Protocol C9, right? Agreed. Activating containment field. David pressed a series of commands, deploying a field designed to safely encircle and capture unknown entities. The field enveloped the figure, and the light it emitted pulsed brightly, as if reacting to their actions. Minutes later, they were staring at the contained being through the reinforced glass of their lab, its glow dimming, replaced by a more defined appearance of an angelic creature with celestial features. Hello? Can you understand us? David ventured, tapping into the outpost's AI translator, which broadcast his words in multiple intergalactic dialects. The creature turned towards them, and in a voice that resonated deeply through the translator, it replied, "Yes, I can understand you. Why have I been confined?" Eric and David exchanged a look of surprise and uncertainty. David took a step forward, choosing his words carefully. "We didn't mean to alarm you. We're scientists and thought you might be well, we didn't know what to think. I am Seraphiel, of the Celestials. I was exploring your planet. I mean no harm," the being, Seraphiel, answered, her tone calm yet commanding. "We apologize for the misunderstanding, Seraphiel," Eric chimed in, his demeanor respectful. "We're just trying to learn. My name is Eric, and this is David. We mean no harm either." David nodded, feeling the weight of this first contact scenario. Perhaps we can learn from each other. This could be the beginning of something groundbreaking. Seraphiel regarded them both, a hint of curiosity now coloring her ethereal features. "Perhaps," she conceded, stepping closer to the partition. "Let us start by understanding each other." The room filled with a new energy, charged with the potential of this unexpected encounter. As the Martian night deepened outside, inside the outpost, barriers began to dissolve, opening the door to possibilities none of them could have imagined when the day began. In the confines of the outpost's secure lab, David, Eric, and Seraphiel sat across from each other at a makeshift conference table, a repurposed lab bench. The Martian winds howled softly against the thick glass of the facility, providing a ghostly backdrop to an unprecedented dialogue. "So, Seraphiel, you mentioned you are an explorer?" David initiated, keen to understand more about their celestial visitor. "Yes, my civilization sends scouts across the cosmos to learn, just as you do," Seraphiel replied, her voice echoing slightly in the sterile room. The lights in the lab seemed to shimmer in response to her presence. Eric leaned forward, his scientific curiosity piqued. "What have you learned about us so far? I mean, before we accidentally brought you here?" Seraphiel tilted her head, considering the question. I have observed from afar. Your species is young but shows great potential. I was curious about your kind's expansion into space. David exchanged a quick glance with Eric, both amazed by the perspective she offered. We're trying to catch up, I guess. Mars is just the beginning for us. What can you tell us about your technology? The way you appeared was unlike anything we've encountered. Much of what we use is based on energy manipulation, she explained. What you saw is a form of what you might call bioluminescence integrated with our technology. Eric scribbled notes, then looked up eagerly. Is that something teachable? Shareable? Possibly, but such exchanges come with great responsibility, Seraphil cautioned, her gaze intense. First, trust must be established. Understood, David nodded. We're here to learn, not to take. Maybe we can start with something simple. Do you need anything? Food, water, or whatever it is you require. I sustain myself differently, but I appreciate your concern, Seraphil said, a slight smile touching her lips. Your willingness to accommodate is a good beginning for building trust. Eric, always more direct, steered the conversation towards more practical matters. Could you perhaps show us some of your technology? Even just theories or principles. We have quite advanced simulation tools here. I might, Seraphil said, standing up to pace slowly around the room, her form fluid and graceful. But first, show me yours. Understanding goes both ways. David stood and motioned for them to follow him to the equipment bay. Let's start with our environmental adaptation tech. It's how we survive here. As they walked, Seraphil listened intently to David's explanations about their life support systems, occasionally interjecting with insightful questions. Eric, meanwhile, observed her reactions, trying to gauge how advanced her knowledge might be. Back at the lab, Eric pulled up a holographic display of Mars topography. We use this to monitor geological changes and plan our excursions. It helps us predict sandstorms, locate water ice, that sort of thing. Interesting, Seraphil murmured, her eyes reflecting the flickering holograms. We use similar monitoring, but our focus is on energy flows and cosmic events. Perhaps there is a way to integrate our approaches. That could be incredibly beneficial, David said, enthusiasm growing. What about navigation? Mars still throws us curveballs sometimes. We navigate by the stars and by sensing planetary energy fields, Seraphil explained. I can show you a basic technique, if you'd like. Would we? Eric exclaimed, nearly knocking over a nearby stool. That would be amazing. Seraphil chuckled softly at his excitement, then turned to the console. Give me access, and I'll input a simple algorithm. It should enhance your system's sensitivity to these natural energy flows. David hesitated, then keyed in his authorization code. There, you're in. Let's see what you can do. As Seraphil's fingers danced across the console, new lines of code streamed across the screen, intertwining with their own programming. The Martian map updated, glowing with previously unseen energy paths. Done, she announced. Now, observe during your next survey. You might find your navigation a bit more enlightened. David and Eric stood back, impressed and somewhat in awe. This could change everything, David murmured. Eric clapped him on the back, grinning widely. And to think, all because of a bizarre encounter on a Martian night. Their laughter filled the room, a sound of camaraderie and newfound possibilities echoing against the hum of the outpost's machinery. In the outpost's observatory, under the vast expanse of the Martian night sky, David, Eric, and Seraphil gathered around a high-powered telescope, aiming its lens towards the constellations that glittered brightly against the darkness of space. The mood was lighter than it had been, filled with mutual curiosity and the thrill of shared discovery. Your constellations look different from ours, Seraphil remarked, peering through the telescope. Your stars are younger, more vibrant. David adjusted the focus, aligning it with her instructions to view a particular star cluster. We've only begun to explore the meanings behind these patterns. What do your people see in the stars? We see history, energy, life, Seraphil explained, her voice taking on a reflective tone. Each star is a note in a cosmic symphony. Eric, ever the scientist, jotted down notes. I like that analogy. It makes the universe feel more alive. It is, she affirmed. Everything is connected. Your science is starting to embrace that idea, but there is much more to learn. David leaned against the console, intrigued. Could you share more about your planet? What is it like? Seraphil paused, her gaze distant. It is a place of light and energy. We have mastered the harmony between technology and nature. It's very different from Mars or Earth. I can only imagine, David mused. But maybe, with your insights, we can start making changes here. Mars is harsh, but it has potential. The three spent the next hour discussing environmental technology, with Seraphil describing techniques her people use to maintain ecological balance. Eric, fascinated, proposed hypothetical applications for Mars. What if we could adapt some of your techniques here? Like energy-based atmospheric processors? That could work, Seraphil considered. But adaptation must be careful. Your ecosystem is fragile. We have good models we can use to test theories safely, Eric reassured her, pulling up simulation data on his tablet. See? We can tweak variables to predict outcomes without any real-world risk. David nodded, appreciating the careful approach. Let's plan a few simulations then. It would be groundbreaking to present a successful model to the Mars Colonization Board. As they delved into the technical details, Seraphil was more than just a guide. She was a collaborator, offering insights from a civilization centuries ahead yet eager to assist. The night deepened around them, and their discussions covered everything from agricultural adaptations to energy conservation. Eventually, they took a break, stepping outside the observatory to take in the raw beauty of the Martian landscape. The red soil stretched out under the starlit sky, silent and serene. Being here with you, discussing possibilities, it's invigorating, David admitted, his voice low. It's not just about survival anymore. It's about making this place a home. Seraphil looked out across the barren terrain, her expression thoughtful. Home is where life thrives. With care and respect, Mars can be that one day. Eric, looking between them, felt a surge of hope. We're going to need more coffee if we're going to solve all of Mars' problems tonight, he joked, lightening the mood. All the coffee on Mars wouldn't suffice, David laughed, grateful for the moment of levity. But maybe, with Seraphil's help, we'll make a dent. The three returned to the observatory, energized by their plans. The night was long, and their tasks daunting, but the promise of a better future seemed just a little closer. As they resumed their work, the lines between human and celestial blurred, bound by a shared vision for the Red Planet. The soft hum of the outpost's life support system was the only sound in the quiet of David's quarters where he and Seraphil had retreated after a long session in the observatory. The room was small and utilitarian, yet it felt cozier than usual with the addition of soft, ambient lighting that David had adjusted to make Seraphil feel more at home. Your quarters are much simpler than I imagined, Seraphil noted, her eyes scanning the room with an air of curiosity. David smiled, a bit embarrassed. Well, we focus on functionality out here, but it's comfortable enough for me. They sat on the edge of David's bed, the only sitting area in the room. The closeness was a new, albeit not unwelcome, development in their rapidly evolving relationship. Today was enlightening, David began, breaking the lingering silence. I've learned more from you in a few hours than I have in months of standard research. Seraphil nodded, her expression softening. And I have learned much from you and Eric. Your determination is inspiring. There was a pause as they both searched for the next words, the air charged with a palpable tension of unspoken thoughts. Finally, David turned slightly towards her, his voice a whisper. Seraphil, there's something about this, about us, that feels important. Her response was a gentle smile. Yes, David. I feel it too. It is rare for Celestials to connect so deeply with others. Yet, with you, it feels natural. Encouraged, David reached out tentatively to touch her hand. His fingers met hers, and the simple contact sent a warm pulse through him. Seraphil's hand was surprisingly warm, her skin emitting a faint glow that seemed to brighten at his touch. This is new for me, he confessed, watching their hands. I mean, I've never felt this way about anyone, let alone someone from, well, another world. Seraphil's laugh was musical, echoing softly around the room. Nor I with a human. But perhaps that is what makes this special. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. David leaned in, his heart racing as he closed the distance. When their lips met, it was a gentle collision of worlds, tentative at first but growing firmer as they both responded to the deep, stirring connection that the kiss ignited. After a moment, they parted slightly, breathless. "Was that all right?" David asked, unsure of the protocols of celestial-human interactions. "It was more than all right," Seraphil assured him, her eyes gleaming with a mix of human emotions and something ethereally beautiful. "It was right." Encouraged, David kissed her again, this time with more confidence. Seraphil responded eagerly, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, driven by a mixture of curiosity, desire, and a profound connection that neither fully understood but both eagerly embraced. As the night deepened, so did their exploration of each other. Touches became caresses, and caresses turned into a dance of intimacy and discovery. Their connection was a language of its own, speaking of possibilities, of unity, of understanding that transcended worlds. Later, lying side by side, David spoke into the quiet. "What does this mean for us, Seraphil? For your mission? For my work?" "We will find a way," she said, her voice steady and sure. "What we share is rare, David. It has power. The power to bridge worlds." David nodded, his mind racing with the implications of their union. "Then let's promise to face whatever comes together." "Together," she agreed, her hand squeezing his. As sleep finally claimed them, the stars outside continued their ancient vigil, silent witnesses to the new bond formed on the red sands of Mars. The next morning, the tranquility of the previous night gave way to urgency. David awoke to the sound of his communications console beeping insistently. Rubbing sleep from his eyes, he glanced at Seraphil, who was already awake, her expression tense. "What's wrong?" David asked, sensing her concern as he sat up. "It's my people," Seraphil replied, her voice grave. "They've sent a message. They know I am here and believe I have been captured against my will." David hurried to the console to check the incoming messages. There, in stark, formal intergalactic script, was a communication from the Celestial Command. It demanded Seraphil's immediate release and threatened severe repercussions for her unlawful detention. "This is a misunderstanding," David said, frustration mounting. "They don't realize you weren't captured on purpose." "We need to clear this up," Seraphil stated, standing to join him at the console. "I can communicate with them, explain the situation, but we will need to do it together to show our intentions are peaceful." David nodded and contacted Eric, who arrived moments later, looking equally concerned. "I heard the news," Eric said as he entered. "How can we help?" "We need to send a unified message," David replied. "One that shows we're cooperating fully with Seraphil." The three of them worked together to draft a response. Seraphil dictated the main points, ensuring that her tone and terminology would reassure her people of her safety and the benign nature of her stay. Once the message was ready, they transmitted it back along the celestial communication lines, hoping it would be enough to defuse the tension. "Now, we wait," Seraphil said, her gaze locked on the screen displaying the vast, silent expanse of space. The waiting was torturous. Eric tried to lighten the mood. "At least we're making interstellar diplomatic history," he quipped, but his humor did little to ease the tension. Hours later, a reply came. The Celestials acknowledged the message but requested a meeting to discuss the incident in person. They proposed a neutral location in the solar system. "It's a good sign," Eric said, reading over the message. "They're willing to talk." "Yes, but we must handle this delicately," Seraphil cautioned. "My people are not quick to trust. The meeting will be critical." David looked at her, determination settling in. "Then we'll make sure they understand. We'll show them the truth of how we've come to respect and care for each other." Plans were swiftly made for the meeting. David and Seraphil would attend, with Eric supporting from the outpost, monitoring communications and providing logistical backup. As they prepared, David pulled Seraphil aside. "No matter what happens, we did what was right. Remember that. Seraphil nodded, her hand finding his. I will. And David, thank you for standing with me through this. The mood as they left for the meeting was somber but hopeful. Each understood the gravity of the situation and the slim chance they had to avert a serious diplomatic crisis. On their way to the shuttle, Eric clapped David on the shoulder. You've got this. Both of you. Just speak from the heart. David managed to smile, bolstered by Eric's support. From the heart, right? Let's hope the cosmos is in a listening mood. With a final check of their equipment and their spirits steeled for the challenges ahead, David and Seraphil boarded the shuttle. As it lifted off, casting a long shadow over the red Martian soil, the outpost faded into the background, but the stakes of their journey loomed ever larger ahead. David and Seraphil's shuttle approached the designated neutral zone, a space station orbiting Callisto, one of Jupiter's moons. The stark, utilitarian structure served as a common meeting ground for interstellar negotiations, its neutral status upheld by various galactic treaties. As the shuttle docked, David glanced at Seraphil, sensing her tension. You ready for this? He asked, trying to offer a reassuring smile. As ready as I can be, she replied, her posture rigid with the weight of what was about to unfold. They were greeted by an assembly of celestial delegates, their appearances varying in subtle, exotic ways from Seraphil's own celestial form. The leader of the delegation, a tall figure with luminescent skin, stepped forward. Seraphil, it is a relief to see you unharmed, he said, his tone formal but tinged with genuine concern. Thank you, Lysander. I am here to clarify the circumstances of my stay on Mars, Seraphil responded, her voice steady. David introduced himself next. I'm David Lyons, an astronomer from Earth. I want to assure you that any misunderstanding was unintentional. The delegates nodded, their expressions unreadable. Lysander then gestured for everyone to take a seat at a round table designed to facilitate open dialogue. As you know, our primary concern is the well-being of our citizen, Lysander began. However, we are also here to understand the nature of your interactions with her. David took the lead, explaining how they had first encountered Seraphil and the series of events that led to her staying at the outpost. It was an accident, a result of our ignorance of her presence and nature. We've since formed a partnership based on mutual respect and cooperation. Seraphil supported David's account, detailing how she shared information about her technology and culture. David and his colleague, Dr. Eric Sato, have shown nothing but honor and integrity in our dealings, she added. Lysander listened intently, occasionally exchanging whispers with his fellow delegates. After a moment of deliberation, he spoke. This speaks well of your character and intentions, Mr. Lyons. However, the accidental capture of a celestial is a grave matter. What assurances can you provide that such incidents will not recur? David nodded, understanding the gravity of the question. We plan to implement a new protocol for dealing with unidentified entities and phenomena. We're also hoping to establish a formal communication line between our worlds to prevent future misunderstandings and to foster cooperation. Lysander considered this, then turned to Seraphil. And you, Seraphil, how do you view these humans and their proposal? I believe there is much we can learn from each other, Seraphil replied. Their willingness to adapt and understand is a sign of their potential as allies in knowledge and peace. The meeting continued with detailed discussions on potential collaborative projects and educational exchanges that could benefit both sides. David and Seraphil proposed a joint research initiative focusing on environmental and technological advancements. As the negotiations drew to a close, Lysander finally relaxed, his earlier stiffness giving way to a more cordial demeanor. It appears we have found common ground, thanks to your efforts, Seraphil, and yours, Mr. Lyons. Let us proceed cautiously, but optimistically. David felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Thank you, Lysander. We look forward to a fruitful partnership. As they left the negotiation room, Seraphil leaned over to David. You handled that well, she whispered. It was a team effort, David replied, his relief evident. I couldn't have done it without you. Their walk back to the shuttle was less tense than their arrival. Both felt hopeful about the future, not just for their personal bond, but for the potential benefits their newfound alliance could bring. Back on the shuttle, as they prepared for the return journey to Mars, David looked out at the expanse of space, a frontier that suddenly seemed a little less daunting. Back on Mars, the atmosphere at the outpost had shifted. News of the successful negotiations spread, lifting spirits and fueling a buzz of excited discussions about future collaborations. David and Seraphil spent their last day together walking along the ridge overlooking the vast Martian plains, a favorite spot that had become their sanctuary for private conversations. "So, what happens now?" David asked, hands buried in the pockets of his jacket against the cold Martian wind. Seraphil, her face calm yet tinged with sadness, glanced at the horizon where the Earth could be seen as a small blue in the sky. "I must return to my people. There's much to prepare if we are to start this partnership right." "I know," David replied softly. "It just feels like we're just getting started." "There is always more to start, David. Our work here, what we've begun, it's bigger than us," Seraphil said, her voice reflecting a mix of resolve and regret. David stopped walking, turning to face her. "And us? What about what we've started?" Seraphil reached out, her hand brushing against his. "We've sparked something remarkable here, something that neither of us expected." "I won't forget that." "Neither will I," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "I guess I always knew this day would come, but it doesn't make it any easier." They continued their walk in silence for a few moments before Eric's voice crackled over their communicators, calling them back to the outpost. "Hey, you two, we're about to start the farewell gathering. Don't be late." As they made their way back, Eric met them outside the outpost. "You okay, man?" he asked David quietly, giving him a knowing look. "Yeah, just saying goodbye, you know?" David managed to smile, clapping Eric on the shoulder. Inside, the crew had gathered to bid Seraphil farewell. There were handshakes, hugs, and words of gratitude exchanged. Seraphil spoke to each team member, her demeanor gracious and warm, reflecting the respect she had come to hold for the humans she had worked alongside. David watched her, pride and pain mingled in his heart. When it was his turn, he took her hands in his, their eyes locking in a moment of shared understanding. "I don't really know what to say," David admitted, his voice low. "Thank you seems too small." "Then say nothing," Seraphil suggested, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "Some things are better felt than said." They embraced, a long, tight hug that spoke volumes. When they parted, Seraphil turned to address the group. "Thank you, all of you, for your kindness and for the trust you've placed in me. I will do everything I can to ensure our worlds benefit from what we've started here." There were cheers and applause as she finished her speech. The group moved outside to watch as Seraphil boarded the craft that would take her back to her people. As the ship lifted off, casting swirling dust over the Martian landscape, David felt Eric's hand on his shoulder. "She'll be back, you know. This is just the beginning, really." David nodded, watching the ship disappear into the sky. "Yeah, the beginning," he repeated, a note of hope threading through his words despite the ache in his chest. The crew returned to the outpost, their minds full of possibilities and their hearts a mix of emotions. As David settled back into his routine, the memories of Seraphil and the promise of future collaborations fueled his determination to continue pushing the boundaries of human achievement and interstellar friendship. Months after Seraphil's departure, David stood once again in the observatory of the Martian outpost, gazing through the telescope at the vast universe beyond. The stars seemed different to him now. They were not just scientific curiosities but symbols of the connections possible between distant worlds. Eric walked in, holding a digital tablet. "Got a message from Seraphil," he announced, a grin spreading across his face. David turned quickly, his heart lifting. "What does she say?" "She's initiated the first phase of the cultural exchange program. It's official now," Eric said, handing over the tablet. David read the message, his eyes scanning the words eagerly. Seraphil wrote of the preparations underway, of the Celestials' enthusiasm about the partnership, and her personal note at the end, "Looking forward to seeing you soon, David." "Sounds like things are moving faster than we thought," David remarked, a sense of pride swelling within him. Eric nodded, his demeanor serious for a change. "This is big, David. We're not just talking about scientific exchanges anymore. This is about bridging two cultures, two entirely different ways of life. David placed the tablet down on the console. I know. When I first started here, I never imagined I'd be part of something this significant. The console beeped, signaling incoming data from the latest satellite pass. Eric tapped the screen, pulling up images and readings. Look at this, he said, pointing to a series of graphs. These are the new atmospheric readings since we implemented Seraphil's suggestions. The results are off the charts. David examined the data, impressed by the improvements. Her technology, her ideas, they're making a real difference. Yeah, and there's more on the way. The Celestials are sending a delegate next month to formalize the educational initiatives. Plus, they want to start joint missions, Eric added, his excitement palpable. David laughed softly, amazed by how quickly things had progressed. From accidental kidnappings to joint missions, huh? Seems like we're making history here, not just observing it, Eric said, clapping David on the back. They spent the next few hours discussing potential projects and preparing for the upcoming celestial visit. The outpost was busier than ever, bustling with preparations and new personnel arriving to support the expanded mission. As the Martian day gave way to evening, David walked outside, the red dust stirring gently around his boots. He looked up at the stars, thinking about Seraphil, about the strange and wonderful path his life had taken. Hey, ready to head back? Eric called from the doorway. Yeah, just a minute, David replied, taking a final look at the sky. He took a deep breath, feeling a connection not just to Mars but to the universe. The challenges ahead were daunting, but the promise of new friendships and new knowledge was a powerful motivator. Walking back inside, David felt renewed, ready to tackle whatever came next. The outpost, once just a speck on the vast Martian landscape, was now a beacon, a starting point for deeper connections and shared futures. As he passed the bustling labs and busy crew members, David knew this was just the beginning. The work they were doing here was more than science. It was a bridge to the stars, a testament to the power of curiosity and cooperation. And somewhere out there, Seraphil was watching and waiting, just as eager to see what the future would bring.